Okay, what we have here is a customer's vehicle from South Carolina. We previously built him an enclosure and had it shipped to him. If you remember, it was the American-based Xmaxx 12s. He said he wanted to do a 2.0 version install. He did this one prior to, did a great job, but he wanted to get an updated version, and he wanted to have us do it because he was so pleased with the enclosure we built for him. So here I am just documenting everything that he has. My memory's not what it used to be, so I always take pictures of everything. Runs, powers, speakers, grills, screws, all that kind of stuff. He's ordered a lot of new parts for it, but we're going to reuse a lot of his older parts because they're still good. You know, RCA cables, different power wires, fuse holders, batteries, and such like that throughout this build. And you see he is running a stock battery, but he does have a HO alternator for this build. Dynamat was not done by me. He put all this stuff in. I don't do Dynamat. I'm too old for that. But here we go. Like I said, just documenting everything that we're taking loose, the tear down process of it. Some of the speakers we're going to reuse. Some of them are damaged. We had to have them replaced, and he ordered them in, had them shipped in. Removed the door panels and started to get the layout for the speakers. Cut a lot of speaker rings for the mids and highs and the super tweeters, and just trying to get a layout design for what we're going to do. He gave us free will on everything and just told us to run with it. Here I am masking off all the areas, both door panels and rear panels. We're going to put pods back there as well. Once those were masked off and taped off, we applied our first layer of resin. Let that sit up and harden overnight. Came back the following day to get it removed. And when I say this was in here, it was in here. And I used the tape, the painter's tape, which was recommended, and it was still in there just because of the grooves and nooks and crannies that this panel had in it. But didn't crack it, didn't break anything, and it finally came out. And you'll see after I removed the panel, they had did some type of modification to it. I don't know what the cutouts were for in the panel, but that was another reason why I designed the panel cover, the fiberglass covers the way I did, to cover all of those bad spots there so I can have a solid foundation to build off of. Keep in mind, this is our first time dealing with fiberglass, so don't be too harsh on us here. Here I'm just showing you the cutouts, dropping the cover piece in, and that's just, I believe that was 1 layer of resin and 2 layers of fiberglass, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this build was done over a year ago, so bear with me. Got everything cut out with my Dremel, marked in, highlighted, just trying to make sure I get the fitment that I'm looking for on those. Once those were done, we jumped up and did the same thing to the front door panels. Cut them out, getting the layout, the form that we're looking for. Once I got that, laid out the panels in place, the trim rings, hot glued them in place and let them sit. Built pods up in the back sides. I had to make these extend out further because the speakers he's using were so deep, over 3.5 inches deep. I had to put these type of spacers in them, but we still wanted to keep it close as we could inside those panels so they wouldn't stick out so far. And we didn't angle them to go facing forward. Again, we were worried about space and clearances more than anything. That's the reason for the speaker positioning, because the reason they're not angled forward or at a slight angle. There's the layout of the first door panel. We ran bolts through it that'll secure it to the actual door panel and hold them in place. But I always do a lot of test fitting, seeing if I like the layout, because I can always still remove it and adjust it because they're just hot glued into place. Door shut. A lot of these speakers are going to be covered by the doors, but it is what it is. Did some modification on the trim rings, take the sharp edges off whenever I get ready to wrap it. Showing you the back view, bolted in place. Then started stretching that fleece over the pods and adding the first layer of resin. And the staples are there to, if I had any air pockets where the fabric was gapped and not touching the wood rings behind it, shot them with staples just so there would be no air pockets to eliminate that. Applied the first layer of resin and then came back with 1 or 2 layers of fiberglass. And repeated the process for the front door panels as well. And you can see the staples, those were the air pocket areas where it was lifted, and I was trying to eliminate that. Masked everything off. And this was, fiberglass is a slow process. That's probably why we don't do a lot of it at the shop, especially being our first one, so I was real cautious in what I was doing, or trying to be at least, watching a lot of YouTube videos and such for the more talented fiberglass guys. They always make sure you get fiberglass past the material. Here I am using that little chip brush, and they always say don't paint it, push it into it, dabbing it, getting them air pockets out, making sure you're getting full contact, getting that, pushing that resin through. A lot of this stuff I learned from a guy, Sprayway Customs. So shout out to him. And just going back at it, multiple layers, letting them dry, applying them and letting them dry. Like I said, it's a waiting game on this stuff. Once they cured up, went back and hand sanded everything with all these angles. Couldn't use the orbital sander. Just hand sanded everything. I think we used some 60 grit or 80 grit sandpaper. Once we did that, blew it off with the air hose and started filling them in with body filler. Any dips, any bad spots, any chip outs, just went through with body filler and went back, hit it with the sand again, and then was finishing them off with what they call a glazing putty. Another thing found out by with Sprayway Customs, and just going back and applying, letting it dry, sanding it, going back, checking it again, air hose, trying to knock out any other, trying to get it as smooth as possible. Now, granted, I'm not going to paint them, but I'm still just trying to go that extra mile, just pushing myself for any future builds. And there's going to be a lot of gaps in this footage because I lost a lot of this stuff. Again, this was over a year ago, so you're going to see some skips off in here to go from one thing extreme to the next. And I believe it starts right here. Test fitting them, I got them wrapped, black vinyl, or as close as I could get to the factory colors, about the best as we could get. There, the back ones are mounted in, put back into place, wired up. He went with all American-based speakers. Those are the coaxials that he actually had in a speaker board in the back that he did. We just try to utilize what he had, try to save some money. And yeah, just going back and forth, test fitting, trying that, seeing the look we're going for. It ended up working out, and you can see that, well, not that part, it'll be another angle I'll show you. Started on the power stations, what I call this, getting everything wired in. This was an ordeal. I think on this one here, I'm testing it, had to mute the sound just for copyright issues. But just going through, make sure everything did power on, nothing caught fire. Just walking around, make sure all my lights are lighting up, no protects is coming on the amps or epicenters. And ran both those lithium 40 amp hours in each side, behind each driver and the passenger side seat, keeping them tucked. Again, doing some test fitting, put the seats back in, closing the doors, making sure fitment's right. If I gotta make any more adjustments, I can make them now. And just started wiring it up back and forth and rerouting wires and doing this and tweaking that. And you just had to take your time. Take your time with it. And the RCA distribution blocks in here, those are some of his older fans, reused those. And this one as well. Looming routing wires, zip tying. As we went along. Plenty of power. He's got plenty of power for this one. But definitely like to look out the layout of this one. But it took some time to get there, and it was on the fly. Adding LEDs. Here we go. We put the clear cover over the half-inch plexiglass, so we can light it up on the inside for him. And just went with the basic black fabric. That's actually trunk-style carpet. If you go to an upholstery shop, it's a trunk liner carpet. What that was. Don't be too hard on that duct tape. This is a work car. Just cut him some slack. Do the logo design on that was when we originally did the box. That was that logo. Just showing you the angle. Seats are pushed all the way back how he sits in them. So that's how we build around that. That way you can still be comfortable as you can in your vehicle. Not riding uncomfortable when you start throwing all that music off in there. Build your system around your car. There it is, lit up. I think I clipped the lights off so you can see it really glow. But I like the way that turned out. That was pretty cool. Didn't tell him about that. He found out about that later after he received the car. It was a switch I put in the console. Here I had to readjust his door handles. The factory ones would not fit because we did that fiberglass and the fabric stuck out too far. So I ordered some online. I think eventually, after a while, he called me and said they ended up vibrating off. They wouldn't stay on there, but we got them on there as best we could. I think eventually said he was going to try to do power windows in it, but I had to cut away the fabric. See, I had to cut that, the little 3 spots of black spot. We had to cut that and change it and modify it just to get that to fit. But it ended up looking better in my opinion. And dash is back in place. Ordered him a dash cover. Didn't tell me about that. Just did that. His dash was cracked up pretty bad. But that was the finished look. Pods are in place. Everything went good. 6x9s in the rear deck. Again, he went with all American-based speakers. All American-based loudspeakers, coaxial super tweeters. There's the epicenter knob mounted up under the dash. Again, stock battery, and once we got it going, never had an issue with voltage with them lithiums in the back at all. I think he was running a 320 high output alternator. Boxed up all the extra stuff we didn't use or dead boxes, wanted to ship it back to him, and he called for the guy to come pick it up, get him loaded up, and he was headed back home. This guy had so many cars on here, I couldn't believe it. But tell me he didn't get him in there tight. This guy knew exactly what he was doing. I think it was raining that day too. But was happy to see it go. And I believe the customer was happy when he received it. Because when he got it, that's when he took this picture from me and sent it right back to me and said touchdown. Appreciate you watching. Stay tuned for the next one.